desire and love are feelings. They aren't stagnant. They're not tattoos. So if you're looking for someone that has the same level of desire or same kind of love as you do, it may be exact when you're 25. If you think it's going to stay that way until you're 90, we need to unlearn some shit. And you're going to be disappointed.
I'm Cindy Darnell. Welcome to The Erotic Philosopher, the podcast where we examine and explore sex and relationships through social, personal, cultural, scientific, political, and other lenses, and unpack and explore your erotic quandaries with the world's wisest erotic philosophers. Welcome back to Season 4 of The Erotic Philosopher, the podcast where we explore life, sex, and modern relationships with some of the world's wisest erotic philosophers. My name is Cindy Darnell. I'm a sexologist and sex and relationships therapist and coach, and of course, the host of The Erotic Philosopher. I'm also the author of Sex When You Don't Feel Like It, the truth about mismatched libido and rediscovering desire. You can find out more about me at my website, cindydarnell.com. Before we jump into today's interview, I want to tell you about a new project I'm working on, my online subscription community, where you can learn more about the issues that we tackle here on The Erotic Philosopher, be they relational, personal, emotional, sexual, and beyond. So many of us need support and help, scaffolding, making sense of the complicated lives and relationships we have these days. So this new online community serves as a portal to learn more from me and others as we dive into the issues most important to us in creating meaningful lives and fulfilling sex. Again, you'll see more on my website, cindydarnell.com, under the Community tab. If you've ever felt conflicted about your relationship to love, romance, and even how you love, you're going to love today's guest, Anne Hodder-Shipp, an award-winning certified sex and relationships educator dedicated to providing accurate, expansive, and compassionate care. They are the founder and lead educator at Everyone Deserves Sex Ed, a sex ed professional development organization, and they work with people and couples of almost any age to build skills, knowledge, and confidence around identity, pleasure, relationships, and communication. Most recently, Anne wrote the groundbreaking, expansive Love Languages ebook, Speaking from the Heart, 18 Languages for Modern Love, and now its accompanying guide, the Speaking from the Heart Workbook, a practical guide to modern love languages. In this interview, Anne and I look at the role of sex education as a community endeavor, not just something that happens at school or just for sex therapists, but something that helps us create communities that are meaningful. And then we shift towards unpacking their work, critiquing the popular 5 love languages, and Anne offers us some powerful reframes about why we need to be a bit more curious around dissecting the love languages as they've been fed to us. Anne Hodder-Shipp, welcome to The Erotic Philosopher.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to catch up with you. And as people have just heard about your, illustrious professional background, I want to also invite you to, as if you were meeting folks for the first time, what would you like people to know about you on a personal level? Who is Anne Hodder-Shipp?
Great question. I identify as queer and a femme. Let's see. I have a recent ADHD diagnosis, which was not a bummer whatsoever. It was just kind of like one of those interesting things of, oh, okay. So there's a name for just how I've always existed in my mind. And it has always presented very differently than what is the stereotype. So I still have people say to me things like, oh, no, you're not. You couldn't be, because I have organization-ish skills and, run a couple of businesses, as though if you have neurodiversity, you can't, that's been interesting to kind of notice everyone else's shit coming up when I tell them more details about myself personally. And I, of course, if anyone has ever followed me on the internet, I love cats. I have 5 cats right now, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, and it totally is, but it wasn't that way on purpose. If anyone has multiple cats, they will understand. They kind of just accumulate when you meet ones that need a place to live. And you're like,
And
I
they
have a
do.
place.
But when I was a child, I used to collect cats. I don't now because I live in New York and the only cats here are around bodegas. But I do have a dog and I would collect dogs if I could, but I can't for various reasons. So
Of course, they make great family members.
they really do. They
Really
really
ideal.
do. I'm very, very content being a dog parent now.
Oh, he's a very cute dog.
He's over there. He might walk past behind me.
I
any
hope
moment
so.
now.
That's my favorite thing about Zoom is now we get to see everyone's animals randomly just pop up and like people try to pretend that they're not there. And it's like, can we just talk about the animal instead right now? Just
No.
they're here. And let's see. I mean, you know, I am a sex and relationships educator. I know that's in my bio. And I do a bunch of things in part because I think that's just how was always just made sense to me, is to have like a diversification of interests and things to do, not because it's correct, but I just think that's what my brain would need. It makes sense to how my brain functions. So I do teach sex ed to regular people, the muggles, so to speak, non-professionals. I also train professionals. There's like a twofer. Then I work with the modern love languages and making tools and resources so that people can kind of develop a maybe more expansive relationship to the idea of what love is like, just so it can benefit themselves and the relationships in their lives. And then I do have my private practice where I spend a lot of time with individuals, couples, teenagers, just kind of providing a combo of education and coaching with an element of just kind of like support ultimately. And still, like, I don't talk about it much just because it's not my favorite thing, but the underlying original business I started in 2009 is PR and marketing support for sex toy companies and adult industry companies that ordinarily don't get the best support from the fancy pants PR firms because they genuinely don't know how to talk about it or how to deal with them. So that's still something I do to this day. And it's just a bit more streamlined because it has more monetary value in the culture I live in, in the US. The money that the PR stuff could bring in made it more possible to do what to me felt a little bit more meaningful, like working in rehabs and offering sex and relationship information to newly sober people, which is incredibly an undervalued, underpaid offering that people do in rehabs around here. But I could kind of justify that by doing the frustrating PR stuff, and it would kind of balance it out. And that was also what eventually made it possible to turn the sex ed support and offerings I was putting together into a more official organization, which is now Everyone Deserves Sex Ed, and developing the programming that exists there today.
Okay. So let's pivot into that as a program then, and then, we'll move on to your more current ventures that are happening like right now, although Everyone Deserves Sex Ed is also happening now. So that is your online training program for sex educators, right?
Yeah, that's what the majority of the work is. And there's also support for teens and parents. There's a separate sign up where you can really work with me to kind of either just get support around how to have conversations or resources that would be useful. And also additional professional development that's maybe less formal than a certificate, but does sort of deep dive into certain topics.
Yeah. And so what have you found to be some of the more enlightening aspects, I guess, of running a sex education business in 2022? What sort of changes have you noticed in the affirmative? Let's start there and then we'll work backwards. Over the years you've been working in this field to see, are we actually moving forward, or are we, what are the changes that you were seeing happening in the field of sex education in your projects in your school, but also in the kinds of people who are registering for your program who think maybe I want to get a formal certification in sex education?
Yeah, I think because I kind of see like the incremental micro differences, because it really is like literally what individual interactions that I'm having. The positives are that more people are interested in this, in getting trained, regardless of whether they're a sex educator, which has been cool. As soon as the training went from in-person to online exclusively, it's been sold out 3 times a year for 3 years.
Wow.
with a wait list.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just clear people are hungry for it. And it's also clearly not just easily available elsewhere. And not just because of in-person versus online options. I realized that the content, as I've been hearing other people's experiences with trainings maybe they've had before mine, that content focuses are slowly going in the direction of less heterosexual cisgender focus and less like sex and romance focus and more just the holistic, like sexuality is a human form of identity, regardless of whether you have sex or even want romance or have relationships in that form in your life.
And so let me just pause you there, because I think this is a really important point for a lot of folks to understand, that the difference between sexuality as an identity and sex as in, the nuts and bolts of anatomy and all that kind of stuff are really distinct things. And I guess it's easy to get confused that once upon a time under an LGBTIQ umbrella, we would, think, that is sex. But actually the LGBTIQ plus acronym is talking much more about identity. It's talking about inclusion. It's talking about politics, and not even necessarily talking about sex practices, what people actually do with their bodies, how their lives are affected by the labels that they assign themselves, or even the labels that are assigned onto them without their permission. And then what we do in our homes, in our clubs, in our social places are really, really different things. So with your training program, also, I think that this is another split that is important for us to make a distinction around, is that sex education is not something that happens in schools necessarily, and nor is school necessarily the place for it to happen, given that schools in many countries are not safe places for young people to be, either physically not safe places, as in the US, or even culturally, socially, as in many other countries where kids get bullied and there are misunderstandings. And, schools are often just not safe places. And so the prerequisites around sex education are also not there for trainers. So organizations like yours are offering a portal into bringing sex education out of schools and into people's lives. What kinds of people are interested in becoming sex educators, and what can they do with a certification like this, especially if they're not teachers?
Yeah. We, at first the idea was, we know that there are people who want to specifically be a sex educator as their career. And so this made sense as a training to offer. But we very quickly were having people who were budding sex educators, sure, or existing ones. But then we would just have all kinds. I mean, really, I'll list some. It's potentially a surprising list. We would have physical therapists, pelvic health therapists, nurses, people who work in healthcare, which to me was like, fuck yeah, this is a win because it's incredibly needed worldwide. Medical industrial complex is an issue when it comes to sex and sexuality. We've had all kinds of clinicians like therapists and social workers who are not sex focused, don't plan to be. Some of them are, but majority are just, I'm a clinician offering mental health support. And I realize I know jack shit. I can swear, I imagine.
Absolutely. Or as we would say in Australia, fuck yeah.
Awesome. I don't know a damn thing about any of this stuff. And I am ready to acknowledge that I don't know. And I don't want to feel uncomfortable about it anymore. Or I want to take responsibility for the gaps in my understanding and the curriculum that I was given for a lot of money, at least in the US. We've had a lot of parents who are like, I'm the cool mom or whatever, who offers the safe house for people to for teenagers to drink on a Friday. And they come to me and tell me stuff that's going on. And I have no idea how to deal with these questions and comments, but I know if I don't learn, I don't know who else they could go to. So I want to be that community member. We have definitely lots of teachers who, again, do not plan on teaching sex ed, but they are working with individuals of a variety of ages, and they don't feel confident with how to even just discuss things like pronoun use, or if someone comes to them saying, someone called me this name and I don't know, does that mean that that's what I am? These really like endearing, sweet questions that young people, fearful
and
questions.
that's where I think, this program that you're running is so useful to people who have established, credentials or professions in other disciplines entirely, or not even, just people who are genuinely interested in being a good citizen, being a good community member, being a good parent, being a good, older sibling, being, a sports coach, any of these kinds of roles where you're dealing with humans is, and because I think we've sort of historically sex has been commandeered sort of into the shadows, or then sex education is this weird thing that happens at school or doesn't, or then that it's this secret thing that only happens once you enter college or university, maybe, and then it's only a couple of classes on, how to not get raped, as opposed to how to actually negotiate a meaningful connection, whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 years. So the project that you're offering here through EDSE, and I'll say that name again, Everyone Deserves Sex, EDSE, and the link is in the bio for folks who want more information, that if you're looking to, if you're feeling like this, that if you want to get a certification where you can confidently say, I can answer these questions for my community, you are that person, you can be that person. You don't need to be some special sex fair.
Yeah, you really don't. And you also don't need to know a lot of factual info. Our brains aren't great. We're not like computers up here, though a lot of people expect them to be. So there, one thing that comes up a lot is people's fear is, maybe they do take a training like mine or someone else's, and they think the way to be the sex educator or the support system is to like have it all memorized and ready to just offer anytime it's asked for. And I understand why that's a cultural expectation that can't be met. What we really talk about is, first, get used to forgetting all of this, get used to screwing up and being like, I think I said the wrong thing. And also get used to the beautiful, powerful reply of, I don't know, I'm going to find out for you. Or I don't know, let's find out together. That's way more helpful than being like a walking encyclopedia. And in addition, we offer, of course, lots of information, but from perspectives that tend to be missing from stuff you could Google yourself or books you could read. We also offer, facilitation skills. We talk about communication tools you can use, as well as blocks that can get in your way. And then on the final day, there's all kinds of just partner exercises, practicing things like active listening and, clarifying questions and how can I offer 3 different kinds of like models you could follow for answering a question in order to just reduce the overwhelm around like, how do I start explaining something? And we will practice utilizing whichever one makes sense the most to you as a way to just start getting comfortable with having conversations and responding to things. And it's just not about perfection. It's like, what's your version of positive neutral affect? Like, what's your version of I'm friendly and serious, but I'm not going to also cheerlead or judge you? And then what's your comfortable way of answering a question for someone that doesn't feel like you're reading a script and just feels like your human reaction utilizing the tools and structures you've been given in the training?
And part of normalizing having these discussions about sex, even like what you and I are doing now, yes, we're accustomed to this. Yes, we do this for a living. And still, for people listening to feel like you have to wait to you reach some sort of magical, mysterious level of knowledge before you can start offering guidance to people, that is often what contributes to sex being sort of siloed, or sex being in this shameful place of, not necessarily that people think it's bad, although certainly some do, probably not the people listening to this podcast, but feeling like you don't want to get it wrong, feeling like you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to tread on people's toes. So this idea of being able to make mistakes, a culture of being allowed to say, oops, I did it wrong, but I know somebody who perhaps knows a bit more than me. Let me go and find out. Let me go and study sex, because one of the myths that you and I have talked about is that sex is natural, and it's so not. It's very much a learned skill.
Right.
And so going to school of some kind, going to take training programs of some kind is such a helpful thing. And so let's sort of pivot now into another arm of your work, which is complementary to the sex education, which is also about relationships and love in particular.
Mm-hmm.
For folks who follow you on social media, you have been a very active critic of the love languages. Can I say that? Is that fair to say?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So you've been a very active critic of the original love languages by a certain dude. Let's talk about how you got into, where you sort of came up with this notion that we needed to reassess the love languages, and then how you have addressed the gaps in people's knowledge around how we talk about love and connection.
Totally. So the short of it is, I and many of my colleagues for years liked the concept of thinking of communicating love as analogous to communicating words in a language. And it was a useful way to kind of like wrap your head around something that's not holdable in your hand, like a feeling. But we were all like, yeah, but this is also kind of like a little problematic, because the first thing that I had learned originally was this man was openly homophobic, but in that really insidiously extra fucked up way, where it's like, no, gay people are allowed to exist. They're just going to go to hell regardless. So I love them despite their sexual orientation. And so right away I was like, okay, well, that's an issue. So I'm going to keep that in mind, and I'm going to let my clients know, if we are going to be talking about thinking of love as a language, I'm going to be as transparent as I can about resource material. And also occasionally online, like my colleagues and I would occasionally just be like, is there an alternative yet? Is there something else we could use? And there just wasn't. And at the time, for about 3 years, I was spending a lot of time in rehabs, working directly with groups of newly sober people of a range of ages, and using the idea of a love language as a great tool, as a starter for people. They love the idea of using that little simple quiz. So I would use those tools and then just reshape them and offer all kinds of like caveats around, here's something to know about this, or here's another way to think about this. And throughout those years, and 9-10 groups a week, the things I would see from the clients, the misunderstandings or the misperceptions or the morphing of some of the things that would be in the text we might be using or the discussions we were having, I was realizing, like, not only is it problematic because the person who invented them is a bigot, but also this stuff is clearly biased in some ways that is not serving anyone of any sexual orientation.
Right.
And is so simplified that there is so much room for interpretation and misinterpretation that some of this stuff actually I was watching it get used to almost like affirm and validate consent violations, for example, or hetero gender roles around like men and women together. Women acts of service are the way that they show love to the husband buys gifts to show love to the woman. Very baseline 1950s stuff, but in like, what year was it? 2018, 19, 17, that type of range. What's time anymore? But so I also was getting clued in like, shit, okay, I have to like rework this all in real time in order to make it work for the people I was working with. And then also in real time, receive the thing they were coming to me with, do my best to not go, oh my God, and like, not just rip my face off because it's like so horrifying what people thought this all meant. And I was basically rewriting it all in my mind, just, on the spot because I had to. And then I want to say it was 2009 or 19. Again, what is time? But I was like, there still isn't an alternative. I can make like a PDF or, like a one sheet infographic that could look really pretty and we all could just have it, that could offer alternatives to those 5, something that's just more nuanced. This was even before the expansion of the idea of love even came about for me. This was really just, this tool sucks. Let's make a better one. And as I was just putting it together, it started to just develop on its own into something more than just a one sheet. And so the ebook as it is now, some people are like, they expect it to be some, very wordy tome that would have 300 pages. We don't need more of those, in my opinion. It is something that offers an introduction to expanding what love could be outside of romance and marriage and heterosexuality, and also making space for the fact that you may have more sources of love in your life than you think because of what you've been told love is and then is not. Then I have about 18 versions, 18 love languages. I call them modern love languages that just offer more of a nuanced example of how love could be received for someone or how it could be communicated by someone.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of The Erotic Philosopher as much as I enjoy bringing it to you. I love being able to introduce these guests from around the world to you, and in return, it would help me enormously if you would go to Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave The Erotic Philosopher a rating and review. Your labor there helps this podcast land in front of people's eyes and ears, and what better way to help create a more inclusive and supportive world than spreading more information to more people, and you'd be doing a great favor to me too. If you would like to find out more about working with me, head over to my website, that's cindydarnell.com, where you'll see my offerings as a therapist or coach for a streamlined and personalized service, plus my online pleasure school under the online courses tab, where you'll find a suite of pre-recorded classes ready to go. There's something there for everyone. You'll also find my online community under the community tab, where you can join me and others just like you navigate the topics we discuss here on The Erotic Philosopher and so much more. There's no shame in needing support to better understand these complex parts of our lives, and I am here to support you every step of the way. We're also on Instagram and Twitter at The Erotic Philos, that's Philos. You can also follow me on social media. I am at Cindy, CYNDI_DARNELL on Instagram, TikTok, and on Twitter. Thanks for joining us here today, and now let's get back to the episode. I think what you're talking about here really intersects with so much of what I see in my in consulting work, my therapy work, my coaching work around this sort of, I'm often referring to it as an epidemic of loneliness, where so many people, either partnered or in relationships of various kinds, feel profoundly lonely. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that the way we have shortchanged ourselves around love, that it has to be romantic love, that it has to be in this particular kind of spoon-fed Disney Hollywood style, and that if we're not having that sort of ka-thump sort of high-level romance, we feel like we are not experiencing love. And so what I love about what you're doing with this, and also your new ebook / print book, is teaching people how to understand, well, what does love even mean to me? Where did I get these ideas from? And then how do I know when I'm being loved? So we really shift our orientation away from just, I don't have what's in the movies, therefore no one loves me, boo-hoo, to maybe I already have something quite rich in my life and I just didn't even know that it was there.
Right. Or I was rejecting it because it didn't count according to all of these rules and standards. In addition, so after the ebook came out, people were like, give me worksheets. I want to do work with this. And I was like, oh, okay. And it took a while, but also conveniently, I had all of these exercises I was making up in real time about love. So I just, over the year or so, created a workbook, which is finally on its way. You can order it online now in print from bookstores that aren't my own bookstore. But it is a series of worksheets, like you were saying, that gives you, it guides you so you don't have to do it on your own, to kind of identify, what does love feel like for me? What does it also feel like to not be loved? What are the emotions I associate? And then what are some actions or things or people or items that bring those feelings up for me, so I can better identify if they might be a source of love, or they may actually be a source that is giving us things that isn't actually landing as love. But because of the source, maybe like a parent or a married partner, for example, it's just kind of presumed that like, well, they love me, therefore I have to accept this, or I have to receive this, or this is their version of love.
So let me ask you about this, because I think that this is a really common challenge for people in relationships of all kind, whether it's a parent-child, a parent with an adult child, a married couple, a couple who are dating, a throuple who are in some sort of relationship, people in relationships, friends even. When, you see people sort of say, well, my love language is, XYZ, and the other one says, well, mine is ABC. Therefore, we are not compatible. Boo, boo, boo. What do you say to that? Yeah.
I say it's similar with your work with desire, right? It's like the mismatch actually is the most normal thing and the thing to expect and look for, because it's a feeling. Desire and love are feelings. They aren't stagnant. They're not tattoos. So if you're looking for someone that has the same level of desire or same kind of love as you do, it may be exact when you're 25. If you think it's going to stay that way until you're 90, we need to unlearn some shit. And you're going to be disappointed.
And disappointing
Exactly.
to others.
Exactly.
When you think of it as this is like my height, it's the same. I hear people talk about it like this with their attachment style. They're like, well, I'm anxious avoidant and I can't possibly be a secure attachment type. And I'm like, what? Where did you get that from? It's not, it's not like eye color.
That's the thing. One of the things I noticed with the original 5 was among the really sort of problematic issues that were coming out of people using this quiz, especially, is whatever they would find out was their love language. It became, this is me. This is my love language, as though this is who I am. Like this.
They take it on as an identity.
Yes. And then it's a permanent one and not a fluid one. And so then they're like, I'm a acts of service. So I need to find someone who is an acts of service as well, so that we can be doing that for each other. And so then it's like, there was no space for just realizing like, you actually might be acts of service in the romantic relationship that you're obsessed about. What about the 4,000 other kinds of relationships in the world? Because love is in itself a platonic act. It can be romantic for some people, but there are a lot of aromantic folks out there. So, for example, if you think you're just acts of service and you apply that to every single relationship in the world, it's just like a role you're playing. You're not actually really being you, present with what you actually find that you need. And you may learn that in one relationship, acts of service was your need, in part because of the dynamic you had. If you break up and you're in a new romantic one, you may actually not be as strong about acts of service anymore. It may be something else, because that dynamic you have with them is obviously different from the last one, because we're not all robots from the same factory. And so, yeah, it's super common. Like, we have to match. That's the secret to lasting love. And that if a love language seems to shift or it's not working for us anymore, that means the relationship is a problem. That's a red flag. When actually it's like, that's a green flag. It means you're a human being and time is passing and you're continuing to exist in that time. Like, it's that rudimentary. It's really it can be that expansive and open and permissive. It really can. We just have to identify where are the walls.
Yeah. And with your workbook, in the online version and the print version, which the links again are going to be in the show notes, it teaches folks how to do the level of self-inquiry to start having a deeper relationship with not only what are the love languages that resonate with me, in contrast with, this is my identity. I'm a Taurus, or I'm a, whatever, I'm a vegetarian, like these things that sort of feel like they're, a part of who you are. And that's not to say you can't use these as part of an identity if you want to, but to recognize that there is a real difference between saying I'm 5'4", which is probably going to be a permanent thing, in contrast with I'm a, gifts and words person that you're only going to be that, and you're only going to be that with every single person, whether it's your boss or your dad or your partner. That you're, as a human being, you're way more textured than that. And Hollywood, again, has tricked us into giving us this very flatlined level of understanding human relationships and the texture and the density of who we are. So projects like this of going, let's do the self-inquiry. Let's actually see when do I feel loved? How do I feel loved? And I love what you're saying about when do I feel not loved? And then what comes up for me when I'm not loved? What's the story I begin to tell myself when I'm feeling unloved? What is being activated in me?
Yeah. And then who do I make it responsible for this instead of myself? Who do I blame saying, you don't love me because I don't feel loved? You don't feel loved regardless of what they do, not because they are shitty partners or people, but there's something coming up for you. And it may be as simple as the thing that is intended to be loving to you is not landing as loving to you for totally valid reasons. But until you recognize that that's actually the clincher, and it's not, everyone, all my exes have been shitty and unloving people. Some of them may have been, but like, if it's everybody, there's a through line there that may actually be, the call is coming from in the house kind of a deal. And I think the hard thing though is really just, I think a lot of people do want to do this kind of work, or they like the idea of being introspective. But most of our experience with even thinking or seeing how that could be demonstrated is maybe social media memed, and it is simplified even there, where you're not quite even able.
Well, especially there.
Yeah. Like, it's like, I don't actually know where to start, or I think I'm doing it because this is what I saw on TikTok. And so the point also of this workbook is there really are, like, it's a step-by-step. It is cumulative. Like, by the end of the workbook, the main point is you're going to be more clear about which modern love languages resonate with you the most and which ones don't. And we make it very incremental, and each worksheet it has an individual point. And there's usually some sort of reflection or process worksheet at the end of each exercise. So it's really meant to kind of be like hand holding, but in like a guiding, I care about you, you don't have to do this by yourself kind of a vibe, not infantilizing anybody or thinking that they can't do this on their own. Many people can, but it's to try to make it feel a little less overwhelming, to kind of break some of this stuff down, ultimately with just the goal of feeling better.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, having a formula or a format, at least, that offers some scaffolding for people to even begin talking about this, because often, as I'm sure you've seen, communication is such a, first of all, it's an ongoing thing. It doesn't just happen once. And then having a format to be able to talk about, I feel loved when, or I feel unloved when, and then the interpretations and the meanings that we put on those events. When relationships become corrosive, either between friends, between lovers, between family members, it's often because we don't know how to talk about it, or we have talked about it around and around and around, and we've hit a point where we can't possibly talk about it using these tools anymore. We need some, to open the windows and let some fresh air in. And so what you offer with these modern love languages is a whole new way of talking about love that is inclusive, that is inquisitive, and that really sets us up for creating connections that are meaningful in an era where 1950s models, even a family, the nuclear family, mum, dad, kids, dog, suburbs, of course it applies, but it applies to fewer and fewer of us. I think it probably never even really applied in the 1950s. It was more aspirational than practical, and now that a lot of people are just throwing all of that out and saying, well, I grew up with two mums, or I grew up with two mums and three dads, or, 6 cats, 5 cats, whatever it is, that you're, you are what you are, and your experiences of love are valuable. And a little bit of self-inquiry is not optional. I think it's essential to showing up as a person, showing up as a community member, showing up as a family member, showing up as a person, as a partner. It's just part of our duty to, not be an asshole.
I mean, basically, at the end of the day, it would be lovely if that could just be, like the main value system we all follow is like, just don't be a jerk to other people or yourself, but definitely other people. But
yeah,
it's a big ask.
Yeah, it is a big ask. So, and before we wrap up, any projects coming into the end of 2022, start of 2023 that you'd like folks to know about? And again, all of Anne's links are in the show notes for those who want to follow up with Anne. What can we look forward to?
Well, the print version of that workbook that I was talking about is going to be on sale, at least from my store, maybe in 2 weeks, which is cool. And we're at the end of October right now. I do have, from Everyone Deserves Sex Ed, we do have our next certification happening in January. And so applications will be open until mid-December. I have what I'm calling a modern love language intensive. I'm building it right now for the beginning of February. It is on sale right now for folks. I will say, if you're interested in,
is that like a workshop or?
Yeah, it's a weekend intensive with me. It's 3 hours Saturday, 3 hours Sunday. It's not a huge heavy lift, but it's kind of like
online.
It's definitely all my stuff is online now, which is cool. So I have people who are like, I love this, and I've been doing these worksheets, and I want to like talk all about it, or I want to feel guided through it and like dive deeper. So that's kind of what that is. It's for folks who anybody can show up for sure, but especially for people who found the worksheets and the workbook useful. It's like, yeah, let's dive in more. Let's do some of my other favorite little activities that I do, maybe in groups with people. And that intensive will come along with the ticket. There will be a sort of mini relationship workbook that's going to come with it. So it really is, it's pretty cool. But again, obviously I'm the one building it, so I'm biased. And if anyone is also interested in all the things and they maybe haven't bought the workbook yet, I will say the intensive, like maybe once a month, I have like a bundle that if you're on my email list, I'll send it to you so you can actually get the workbook and also a ticket to the intensive for a pretty significant discount. So don't stress if the prices feel really high. It will be bundled. The next email blast is going out in probably 2 weeks. So just a heads up for your listeners, you can get a discount if you get on my email list. And those are the things I can think of and remember at the moment, but
excellent. And the things that you can't remember right now, people again will head to your website, head to all of your social media links to catch up with you. And even if you're listening to this at a different time period entirely, that's always the best thing to do, is just to follow the links in the show note. Anne Hodder-Shipp, it's been a delight. It's always a delight talking with you. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule with all your projects, and I look forward to seeing you again socially soon.
I know, I hope soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.